All right, we are continuing to follow the stages that Harold Wilmington laid out for us, those 12 basic stages in the Book of Ages. And we've done the creation stage and the patriarchal stage. We've seen Moses and the Exodus stage. We've talked about the conquest stage, and now we moved on to the judges stage. So in the conquest stage, Joshua takes a majority of the land, divides the land so that each of the tribes have their inheritance. Those tribes then are responsible for pushing out the rest of the enemies to do the cleanup. Joshua has broken the back of Canaan by taking Jericho in the central campaign, and then he's taken the major opposition in the south and in the north, and now in the division of the land, they will be responsible for taking the rest of the land that God has promised. What's curious sometimes is whether or not the tribe will be obedient or whether they will settle. So the leaders after Joshua are referred to in the book of Joshua as the elders. So the leadership passes on to the local tribal leadership and the elders in the land. Unfortunately, things devolve into what becomes the mantra of the time: every man did what was right in his own mind. So we are forgetting what God has said. We have forgotten Deuteronomy. We have forgotten the law of God. And now we are just doing what is right in our own mind. Who are the judges? We think of judges in a particular sense of laws and court cases and all of the rest. But in the book of Judges, they are military leaders rather than judicial leaders. They are raised up by God to deliver God's people. Often they are regional deliverers, so they are working in one area of Canaan, and they certainly have different levels of spiritual maturity. You may even question whether they have any spiritual maturity at all, as in the case of someone like Samson, right? So these are the judges that what happens is they get involved and oppressed by a people, and God raises up somebody to deliver them. That's the judge. And so God is the king, and he raises up judges to deliver them when they cry out to him. The time of the judges is a time of spiritual apostasy. It's immoral, it's politically unstable. There's a lot of social degradation. And so what happens are these, what we'll call the cycles of sin. It's a repeating cycle that happens over and over again in the book of Judges, where they start out prosperous and at peace, then they begin to worship the gods of the land, and they begin to lose their lands to invading enemies, and they are oppressed for a period of time until they cry out in repentance before God, and then God sends a deliverer. The deliverer comes, and a time of peace comes after, during which there is then prosperity and idolatry, and the whole cycle repeats itself. Do you see the problem? And so God's people are prone to wander, prone to wander away to idolatry every single time they're prosperous and they get the chance to the freedom on their own, and it is the oppression that causes them to remember who God is and to cry out to him for deliverance. And it's interesting, if you look at a list of the judges, you'll notice that the years of oppression go up. Look at, for Othniel, the first judge that's mentioned, the oppression happened for 8 years, but after Othniel came, they had 40 years of peace. Look at Samson, 40 years of oppression followed by 20 years of peace, right? The years of oppression are increasing and the years of peace are decreasing. Here are the judges that are mentioned. You got Othniel and Ehud, the left-handed one. Yay, go left-handers. Then you got Shamgar. You got Deborah and Barak in that story. You got Gideon, some minor ones in Tola and Jair. Then you have Jephthah, some other minor ones in Ibzan and Elon and Abdon. And then you have an extended discussion of the life of Samson. So you can notice that the enemies are different. as well. You've got Mesopotamia and Aram. You've got Moab. You've got Canaan, different Canaanite peoples. And then you've got the Philistines. We're going to be talking soon about the Philistines and where they came from, because they are not Canaanites. They are not in the land of Canaan generation after generation. They are arriving as immigrants as well, as a seafaring people. And so we'll talk about them perhaps in an upcoming video. So the final judges that we have is that priest of Micah, the priest of Dan, that's mentioned at the end of the book of Judges, and that whole horrible pericope. The whole story is just, when everybody does what is right in his own mind, it gets to that. The last judge we have is Samuel. Sometimes he's called the last judge and the first prophet. And Samuel will be the one who will bridge the time of the judges to the time of the United Kingdom. There is a bright spot in the book of Judges, the bright spot in the Judges stage, and that's the book of Ruth, in which, for that story, we're glad to see some light, some hope, some generosity, some wisdom, some celebration of what God has done and what God has provided. And we have to go to the book of Ruth for it. It's very seldom does that light flicker through in the book of Judges. But that's our Judges stage. This chart I took from a work text from the Institute of Biblical Studies, and what I liked about it was, and I hope you can see it all right, notice all of the archers. Each of those represents a different enemy during the Judges period. So everything from Mesopotamia to the Sidonians to Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Philistines coming in from the sea. You got Amalekites, Hittites, Edomites, Ammonites, Moabites, everybody gunning for Israel. And the reason is because, as it says in the book of Judges, when the Israelites grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they did not drive them out completely. And so as a judgment, God says, you have not obeyed my voice, and so I am going to leave them in the land to test you, and they shall become thorns in your sides. Because of the incomplete obedience, which read incomplete obedience as disobedience, because of that, then all of these nations are thorns in the side of Canaan. And that's why we have the Judges period. All these people were left behind. Those tribes didn't finish the job in driving out their enemies. And as a result, because God says they didn't obey my voice, those enemies will become thorns in your side. So the book of Ruth, as I said, at least the period of the Judges stage, ends on a good note. There's good news in a dark time. There's a great picture when everybody else is abandoning the faith for idolatry. There is covenant faithfulness shown in the book of Ruth. It shows how God's mind was willing and able to see beyond the people of Israel as an ethnic group to the inclusion of a Moabite in the lineage of David. It's an incredible story, and you'll have to check out our video where we talk about that. It's a great celebration that ends with, oh, this blessing, blessed be the Lord. The women celebrate Naomi and God's provision for Naomi. Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. The name there is Boaz, and then his son Obed, and then Jesse, and then David, and a few generations later, Christ. So that's the relevance, I guess, of the book of Ruth. So there's your Judges period in quick outline form, showing you who the judges are, what kind of people the judges were, and what incomplete obedience actually leads to. Thanks for listening.